Officers and gentlemen. My name's Kim. Years ago I was 22, young and idealistic. I had dark brown hair that was almost black. I had just graduated Northwestern Law School near the top of my class, which was a big deal, especially 'cause I was an Army brat, grew up on military bases. My dad was a colonel, retired now, and me joining the JAG Corps at Fort Bragg? It was like the dream he always had for me. Starting as a corporal, a prestigious assignment, all eyes on me to make him proud. I was always the bookworm with starched uniforms and had the kind of ambition that's so ingrained you don't even think about it, until it all starts to unravel. First few months, things were good. I was defending soldiers, feeling like I was making a difference. Then came this new assignment: catch a group of soldiers who molested and almost raped a female soldier on base. The evidence pointed to Alpha Company, these handsome blonde soldiers, an elite group, all chiseled jaws and confident smirks. I started investigating. After I had interviewed a few of them, their cocky attitude and innuendo basically convinced me they were guilty. But solid evidence? Hard to come by. The victim was traumatized, scared to speak up too much, and their alibis were almost too perfect. The medical report had some vague stuff about a blood stain, not definitive. But I made a decision to make one tiny change. I changed a single word, made it say the blood matched Jackson, one of the Alpha guys. My hands were shaking as I typed, ink smudging on the page when I signed my name. I felt sick about it, guilty as hell, but I thought it was the right thing, morally justified. Justice had to be served, even if I had to bend the rules. The victim's face kept haunting me, pale, eyes wide, like she didn't even recognize her own body anymore. I had to make it right, even if I had to break the law to do it. But I got caught. The conflicting report landed me in the general's office. He's the top-ranking officer on base, all stern looks and a voice that makes you stand at attention even when you're sitting. Gray hair buzzed short, jaw so tight it could crack walnuts, and these eyes, dark, almost black. He was an imposing man, 6'3" and broad shoulders and thick arms. I expected punishment, maybe court-martial, but I couldn't possibly imagine what came next. He asked me to sit and I did. He laid out all my deeds. I had tampered with evidence, almost getting an officer court-martialed. At the very least, I needed to be dishonorably discharged, but most probably, charged and convicted with felony tampering of evidence, landing me in jail for at least 5 years. I started to sob with my face in my hands. He didn't stop. He continued to lay out the charges, his voice as serious as cancer. I couldn't stop crying. I tried to be strong, but I knew this was a slam-dunk charge. All the hopes my dad had for my career, the pride he had at my graduation, I just threw it all away and I wanted to disappear from the planet. I even thought about jumping off the Pico Bridge, ending it all. I was at rock bottom. The general rose from his chair and walked from behind his desk. He sat on the edge of his desk in front of me, and barked for me to stop crying. I continued to sob, but I tried to hold back as much as I could. There are things that can be done here, he stated. I looked up with hope. I will do anything to make amends, I swear, I pleaded. He said, get on your knees. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excuse me, sir, I whimpered. You heard me. Get on your knees. He was commanding now. I immediately got on my knees in front of him. It was like his voice compelled my body to move. He took a step closer and put his hand under my chin and looked down deeply into my eyes. Suddenly I had a flashback. When I was a young girl on base, I wanted to get 20 cents from my dad, so I ran to his office. It was a bungalow office, so only a small ramp led up to the door. I peeked through the window first to see if he was in, but what I saw confused me. There was a young woman in uniform, standing in front of my dad. My dad was gripping her arms. She was looking away from my dad's face, shaking her head no. I never understood this scene, until it came back to me right now. The worlds collided in my mind. I finally understood. Then the general, took a step back and sat on the edge of his desk again. Crawl over to me. I obeyed immediately. I have no idea why. What the hell was I doing? He motioned for me to then get on my knees. He grabbed one of my hands and set it on his crotch. I could feel a hard stiffness. He rubbed my hand up and down until I pulled my hand back. He immediately grabbed my neck and squeezed. I was in shock and my windpipe was completely cut off. He said, "Put your hand back now." I did, and he let my neck go. I rubbed and stroked his increasing stiffness through his pants. I was so ashamed I could die. Then a phone rang outside his office and he looked up. "Get up," he barked. He strode back to his seat behind his desk, his hand adjusting something down his pants. I quickly got up and sat back on the chair. Like nothing had happened, he said, "I'm putting you on probation. You'll report back directly to me everything you learn about this case. This file I have on you will stay right here on my desk, understood?" I nodded. "Dismissed," he barked. I stood up, saluted him and got out of there. In the shower, I kept playing the events over and over in my head. I hated him so much that my head was burning up, but at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about the feeling of his stiffness under my hand, and the image of me rubbing up and down started to make me wet. I reached down to my wetness and started to rub myself. At the same time, with my left hand I started to rub my right forearm, simulating the long stiffness I felt in the general's office. I fell asleep that night with a feeling of guilt so large I was drowning. That moment changed everything. The general, he saw something in me, I guess. Or maybe he knew about my dad's past, I don't know. But after that, it was like a dangerous cycle started. He'd call me to his office under the pretense of discussing the case, but then it would get intense. The first time he touched me, just a hand on my shoulder, lingering, thumb brushing over my uniform, over my breast and over my nipple. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. His touch was firm, authoritative, and God help me, it awakened something in me I didn't know existed. A heat that started in my chest and spread lower, even as my brain screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. I felt guilty, so guilty, but at the same time, it was like a part of me that had been asleep for years was finally waking up, something soft and needy, buried under all those years of discipline and duty. Each time we met in the hallway, in the mess hall, the tension was palpable, like the air was charged with electricity. He was aggressive, domineering, but in a way that made me feel safe whenever I was near him, yet terrified at the same time. He called me again into his office and he told me to stand in front of him. He was holding my file in his lap while sipping a whiskey on his leather couch and just looked at me like I was property. I knew what this threat meant. He told me to undo my uniform buttons one by one, slowly. After my jacket was off, he told me to undo the buttons of my white blouse. He smiled with pleasure. I'd just stand there, frozen, torn between wanting to run and wanting more, wanting to see what would happen if I kept obeying his commands, if I let him keep going. He came over to me and unhooked my bra, a lace thing I'd bought on a whim in town, ivory with little pink roses. He paused, thumb brushing the pink roses. "Pretty," he said, voice gruff. And I blushed, all the way down to my toes, because no one had ever called me pretty like that, like it was a secret, a sin. He undid the belt of my pencil skirt. I was breathing so hard now. He dropped the skirt to the ground, exposing my lace panties and garter belt, also with pink roses. He slowly moved his fingers along the edge of the panties, slowly grazing over my secret place, and lingered there, circling there. I looked away and moaned. The scene in my dad's office that day screamed back into my mind. I was in the exact same situation and I couldn't believe it. He then got his hand under the fabric of my panties and reached his hand down and felt the wetness that started minutes ago. By this point I was completely wet down there, wetness dripping out to my thighs. He rubbed my slit up and down in a slow motion, and it started to build a pressure down here in me. He then pulled his hand out and said gruffly, "Get on your knees." I looked up at him, made eye contact and then knelt. He started to undo his pants. I remembered the large stiffness that I had fantasized about. Was I finally going to do this unthinkable deed? Then I saw it. It was the largest thing I had ever seen. It was thick and throbbing. It was clearly pulsating with blood because it moved in pulses and was reddish purple. I looked horrified, yet I couldn't stop looking. I was in awe as it swung near my face. He guided it across my lips and teased it over my nose. It smelled of clean soap and my mouth opened automatically for some reason. He slowly pressed it against my lips and I let it inside. He let out a sigh and pushed deeper inside. My mouth was so wet, yet it was hard to keep more than just the head in my mouth. It was so large that it filled me up. I thought I would choke. I just knelt there and took it as he increased his rhythm, in and out, the strokes getting longer and quicker. The thought of me on my knees pleasing this powerful and dangerous man made me so excited that my mind was converting shame into ecstasy in real time. I caught a glimpse of myself in the large mirror on the wall and I could see what was happening to me. It was exhilarating. He pace quickened, and then he said, "Don't you let a single drop hit the floor, do you understand me?" I nodded the best I could with my mouth so open. I didn't understand what he meant by that. Then came the explosion. He erupted like a volcano in me. There was a huge wave of liquid flooding my throat, and I swallowed as fast as I could. The waves kept coming, so over and over again I forced myself to consume everything he was giving me. His body was convulsing and I could see his eyes were closed. I kept up with my duties, as the waves subsided. The flavor was so strange in my mouth, but for some reason I told myself that I loved it since this is something precious this powerful man gave me. I made sure I followed the general's instructions to a T. When he finally was finished, he pulled out. I saw his wet member and was mesmerized, in awe of its size. He pulled it back into his pants and walked away back to the couch. I heard him say, "Come over here." I joined him just in my undergarments on his lap. He caressed me and kissed me passionately. He was so tender and affectionate, my mind was spinning with feelings of love. Was this love? It couldn't be because I was just violated, but I couldn't catch myself from falling for this man that just used me like a rag doll. But I felt so safe in his arms. I closed my eyes and smiled and breathed so deeply. Every day after 1700 hours, the duty officer in his office was gone and the place was empty except for us. There was a complete bathroom with a shower attached to his office and I would change into outfits he wanted me to wear. Silk stockings, pretty pink teddies with lacy panties. Sometimes he just wanted to look and touch me. We would kiss and tell me to go home. Sometimes he would want much more. He would call me in after dinner and have me undress in front of him and service him orally, and just as I did before, I did my duty and he rewarded me with his embrace, the overwhelming feelings of love. I was truly falling deep for him. I wanted to do anything for him. One evening I was summoned into his office via a note in my mailbox. Red lace. That day I went to the department store and picked out something I knew he would love. In his office, I found him sitting on the couch with a brandy. He told me to stay standing and I did. I smiled at him with such love. Then he motioned to the bathroom. What I saw made my heart sink. It was Jackson, from Alpha Company. I almost screamed, but I kept my cool. He had a drink in his hand and sat in another leather chair, relaxed and smiling. My heart sank because I had an idea what could be coming. "You know, you almost buried a good soldier," explained the general. "I think you need to make it up to him." My heart sank even deeper. "Take off your clothes and put on what you brought." I couldn't believe it. My file was on the coffee table and I knew what this was implying. How could he do this to me, the man I was falling for? I was so angry, but I obeyed, like the good girl I had become. I slowly started to undress in front of the men. Piece by piece they were savoring it. When I got down to my bra and panties, Jackson sat up, moving his eyes closer to me. I slowly undressed naked, crossed my legs and put my hands behind my back. The general motioned to my bag and I walked over and took out my red outfit. Another show ensued and I slowly put the sheer panties and teddy on. The stockings were also red. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. The general was already behind me and he took my arms to my back and started to cuff them. I had no idea where they had come from. He whispered into my ear, "You won't be harmed, just let go. I know you want to." I felt more anger, but at the same time, I was already dripping wet, putting on something so pretty in front of the men that had complete power over me. He then pushed my shoulders down and I dropped to my knees. Jackson walked over and stood in front of me, unzipping his pants. For some reason, my hatred for him was subsiding and I noticed how handsome and strong he was. He presented his large member to my face. I knew what to do and I started. He grunted and started to stiffen in my mouth. He was almost as long and hard as my general. I looked over at my general and he also was rubbing himself, enjoying the show. The in and out rhythm started to make me delirious and I started to see stars when suddenly, I was pulled off of Jackson. It was the general lifting me up and literally carrying me over to the edge of the leather couch. He bent me over and spanked me. I squealed with the pain and he started to rub my wetness. Jackson soon followed and turned me towards him. He was standing next to the sofa and entered my mouth again. He was moving in and out as my general was stroking his fingers up and down over my panties. I was soaking wet when he pulled my red lacy panties down to my knees. I immediately felt a large head on my slit. It was like the pressure was so immense, but it wouldn't enter. He pushed again and again, and it slowly started to advance into my body. My spine was shooting up and down with pain and I screamed with Jackson still in my mouth. My general was fully submerged in my body and I felt that he owned me completely. He began his motions, in and out at a steady slow pace and I could feel a pressure down in my bosom. He started to pick up the pace and my pressure was at a boiling point. He reached under my breasts and squeezed my nipples and I climaxed so hard. The waves of pleasure shot through me over and over again. I was yelling now with Jackson's flesh still in my mouth. My general was faster now, more aggressive. He was taking all that I was and not asking permission. He was my king and I had to submit to him, and that thought brought me to another climax that shocked me over and over. He started grunting and then released a wave into my body, like a pressure cooker blowing its top off inside me. It hit me hard over and over again and I could feel it deep inside me. He was breathing heavily and Jackson pulled away. I slumped over the armrest of the couch, spent. That's when Jackson pulled me up. My panties fell to the ground. He led me to the bathroom where he proceeded to put me into the shower and turned on the water. I started to clean myself off while he undressed. He joined me in the shower and had me put my hands on the edge of the bathtub, my buttocks raised high. He then took his share of me, claiming his revenge on my body. He was much more aggressive, angry, and vindictive. It was like he wanted to kill me, but since he was so large, I was being ground up inside and it made me climax again, in a huge explosion. He didn't slow down for me as I screamed with pleasure. He kept going until he exploded inside of me, giving me a deposit that felt just as large as my general's. He immediately turned me around and had me clean up the rest of his member with my mouth and tongue. The shower water was dripping over my face, so with my eyes closed I could hardly figure out what I was doing. It was all over in such a blur. I couldn't even understand what I just did. Who was I? I was such an innocent bookworm, with such great ambitions. Now I'm doing the dirtiest things imaginable. The following days were a blur of escapades, but he never again shared me with anyone else. I was just all for him. He had complete dominion over me. But it wasn't just the roughness. There were softer moments too, when he'd trace the outline of my glasses, lifting them to wipe the steam off the lenses after we'd been together. Or the way he'd smell my hair, muttering something about lavender soap, like it was a comfort to him, something gentle in all this chaos. Once, in his quarters, he showed me a photo of himself as a young lieutenant, standing next to my dad, back when they'd served together, before I was born. He was a good officer, the general said, fingers brushing the edge of the photo, and I felt sick again, wondering if he'd known my dad back then, if he'd seen those same touches, those same secrets in my dad's office. Did he think of my dad when he looked at me? Did I look like that girl from my childhood memory, the one in uniform? The memories of my dad, that girl in uniform. They kept coming back, making me wonder if this was some kind of cycle, some twisted thing I was repeating. But with the general, it was different. I was consenting, even if it was against all my principles. Was it true love or was I just fooling myself? Sometimes, when he gave me orders, stand there, take off your shoes, look at me, I'd feel that old familiar rush of obedience, the same as when my dad would tell me to sit up straight at the dinner table, or press my uniform until it was starched stiff. But this was different. This wasn't about discipline. This was about desire, raw and unapologetic, the kind that makes you do things you never thought you'd do. And the worst part? The victim from the Alpha Company case, she stopped coming to me. I'd see her in the mess hall, sitting alone, and when I tried to talk to her, she'd flinch, like I was just another predator in uniform. I knew why. She could see it in me, the way I carried myself, the guilt written all over my face. I'd tampered with evidence to put her attackers away, but in doing so, I'd become something else entirely, something she couldn't trust. And maybe she was right not to trust me. Because I was keeping bigger secrets now, secrets that could ruin both of us. And then there was the night in his quarters. It was cold, a late winter chill that seeped into the bones, and he'd invited me under the pretense of discussing strategy. But when I arrived, the room was dim, only a lamp on his desk casting a warm glow, and he was in civilian clothes, khaki pants, a sweater that stretched across his shoulders, looking more human, less like a general. He poured us both coffee, black, and we sat on his bed, close but not touching, talking about nothing, his first assignment overseas, my favorite professor at Northwestern. It was almost normal, almost nice, until he reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his knuckles grazing my cheek. I shouldn't, he said, but he did it again, slower, his thumb tracing my lower lip, and I leaned into him, because this was the softness I hadn't known I needed, the tenderness beneath the dominance. He kissed me then, gentle, almost hesitant, like he was afraid I'd break, and I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him closer, because I didn't want gentle. I wanted the roughness, the danger, the way he made me feel like I was both sinner and saint, all at once. He must have felt it too, because he groaned, pulling me onto his lap, hands sliding under my skirt, lifting me up so I could, and I gasped, because this was different, this was deeper, more intimate, and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his sweater. He made love to me that night. Face to face, he entered me, and for the first time, my body wasn't crippled with pain, it was warm and it felt perfect. He took me slowly, deliberately, and when he climaxed inside of me, I felt the perfect love. The perfect moment, like I was entering eternity. I was flying with love in my heart. We stayed like that for over an hour, just kissing and embracing. It was the sweetest experience of my young life. Lots of complicated things happened after that night, but all of it is just details. Fate is inevitable. Maybe that's the worst part. I still don't regret any of this, not one bit. I wanted to drown in it, let it consume me, because at least then, I knew the feelings and moments were real, the only thing in my life that I know to this day that were real. I'm flawed, guilty, but real, and I'm not going to apologize for it.